24 medical students are about to start classes at a new medical school campus in St. Cloud, run by the University of Minnesota and CentraCare. This week we talked to CentraCare's Mike Blair about how the new school came together and its mission for Minnesota. This is Hospital Matters, a podcast from the Minnesota Hospital Association. We're having conversations about issues impacting hospitals, health systems, and patient care in Minnesota. I'm your host, Tim Nelson, and I'm joined in this episode by Mike Blair, the CFO and Senior Vice President of Academic Affairs at CentraCare. I talked to him just days after the ribbon cutting for the new campus.
So the building is ready to go. Sunday before this last Sunday, we had the grand opening, the ribbon cutting ceremony. We think we had about 1,200 people come through and tour the new medical school. So it's all set. It looks great. Interesting enough, we've done this in partnership with the University of Minnesota in the CentraCare blue and green colors, and the university's maroon and gold do not match up very well. So when you're in the building, you'll notice that everything on the second floor is all in University of Minnesota colors, and everything on the first floor is in CentraCare colors. So really showing the degree of partnership that we have. Both names are on the building. All the classrooms and all the conference rooms up there are named after the town in which our original 24 students came from. So we have like Foley, we have Sartell, and it'll stay that way. So it's kind of a way to honor those in that first class of incoming students, and it's kind of a nice way just to emphasize the outstate Minnesota focus of that particular medical school.
So a lot of these folks are already in town, getting ready to start classes. When are they actually going to be in front of instructors?
The end of August is when they start. They're having their first classroom visits will be, I think, on August 23rd, if I recall correctly. We have housing that's adjacent to the medical school. As we always tell people, if you think back to when you went to the university in your dorm room, it is nothing like that. It's underground parking, anywhere from studio to 3-bedroom apartments. There's a sport court, a dog park. We've got barbecues, all kinds of things set up there. So it's really intended to really enhance the living environment, and they're not required to stay there. We hope that they do, because we really want to build up that camaraderie. But we have some of our incoming med students that already have a house in the area, so they obviously are not going to uproot their family and move into the apartment complex. But many of them are living there, and there's 96 units. So as we grow from one class up to 4, we'll have plenty of room for students who may want to live right next door.
Well, that's one side of the classroom. What about the other side, the instructors and the staff and that kind of thing? Obviously, CentraCare is going to play a role in that. How's that going?
That's been going very well. And if we go, way back in time when we first kind of created this dream, and that was about 4 years ago, we were really focused on 3 things. One is we wanted to get a medical school open with the intent that we really needed to address the shortage of physicians in outstate Minnesota. But once they graduate from medical school, they still have to go on and train before they can practice. And that training programs are, anywhere from 3 to 7 years long. Most of them are around 3 years long. And so we really needed to expand those residency programs. So right now we currently have 18 residents. We want to grow that to at least a 72, and that kind of represents if we've got 3 classes of or if we got 24 students graduating every year, and it's a 3-year training program, theoretically we need 72 training slots to make sure we don't strand any of the graduating students. Now, we know not all of them will want to train here at CentraCare, but we know others, like they do today, come from the Twin Cities or all across the country and train at CentraCare. And so we wanted to make sure that we had at least enough of those training programs, because it doesn't really do us a lot of good if we graduate students and then we send them to the metro or we send them out of state to get that training. Well, we want them to stay here, because usually after 3 years, they probably get established in the community, they get established in that health system, and it's harder to get them back. So we really want to focus on growing that training program as well. And then the third is we want to do more research focused around how do we better the health of rural residents. So we had all those going on at the same time. The first one that's really come to fruition is it was the medical school, but we're also in partnership with the university to create a rural health focused research organization here at CentraCare, and the university is also working very closely with us as we expand our residency program. So we've already got a pediatric program in place. We're working on a psychiatry program, a general surgery program as well, internal medicine with a primary care focus. We'll expand our primary care. So looking at obstetrics as well. So really trying to address those shortage areas that we have out here in rural Minnesota.
And you sort of touched on this, but talk to me a little bit about how this came together, how the U and CentraCare shook hands to bring this together. Obviously the U has a substantial medical school in the Twin Cities already. How does this work?
Yeah. So 4 years ago, Dr. Holman, who is our CEO, and Dr. Toller, who's the dean of the medical school, myself, and then Emily Lawrence, who's chief of staff for Dean Toller, we got together in Dean Toller's office and we started creating this dream about can we create something together that neither organization could create on their own. And I really appreciated Dean Toller's focus around, recognizing that the University of Minnesota is a land grant institution and it has, an obligation to serve all of Minnesota, not just the metro areas. And as we talk through it, we're like, well, we need to get more physicians out in rural areas. So we kind of recognize we need the ability to educate them through a medical school campus, but we also need a presence out in those areas. So, we could bring the presence out in rural Minnesota, being CentraCare, in, an area that we could train them and they can bring the accreditation medical school. So the regional campus is accredited through the University of Minnesota's accreditation. And so what we recognize is probably neither one of us could do this on our own. The university could try to open a medical school, out here, but it would be more difficult for them if they didn't have a partner. And same with us. We looked at, well, is there another option? Like, what if we just created our own medical school? And as we kind of researched that, we kind of came to the conclusion that that would be more like a 10-year project, trying to get a medical school up and going and getting accreditation. So the two of us all agreed, like, okay, recognize we can only get this done if we do it in partnership. And I would say that Dean Toller and Dr. Holman have a very trusting relationship. And that's really what we focused with this group. So we've got a governance committee. I co-chair it along with Dr. Shaili Prasad from the University of Minnesota. We've got 8 members on that governance committee, and it's all about how do you execute on the vision. And we've been very clear from day one that if you're on that governance committee, you're there to represent the vision and the dream, not your individual organization. And so we very much make the decisions based on what we think is going to be best for that vision, and not based on what may be better for our individual organization. So I would say, as an example, we talked about this at the ribbon cutting ceremony, is that by recognizing that we could only do this by coming together and in doing it in a trust, a shared trust model, it really helped with the effectiveness of that whole program. And it's really a testament when you look at the building. It's a wonderful facility, and you see the University of Minnesota up on one corner, and you see CentraCare on the other corner. It's really a great example of what you can do when you have a shared trust.
Well, but I'm also curious about the resources. Obviously, you put a substantial amount of real estate and investment in this. The university did as well. Talk to me a little bit about how the investments you both made into this project.
And just in terms of the facility, so we took a $10 million facility. It was a relatively new facility. I think it was about 10 years old. And that was our administrative service building. And when we went through COVID, and many of our employees went remote or to a hybrid status, we were able to free up that building. And so we contributed to become the medical school. We put about $10 million of refurbishment into the building. And then the state gave us a grant for $5 million. So we put $20 million into the facility, $5 million grant from the state, and then the housing I was talking about earlier that's adjacent to it, that's about $20 million that we contributed. And so in terms of the relationship between the university and CentraCare, we did tell the university that we would cover, any structural deficit, in the campus. We'll do it through academic mission support. We'll basically make sure that if it generates a loss, and it will for the first few years, that we will cover that for the university. And for us, the value we've gotten from the university is one is just the know-how we've gotten. Like they have the expertise in undergraduate, medical education. They have the expertise in graduate medical education. They're doing almost $400 million worth of NIH grants. And so we really have benefit from their knowledge base and all these committees that we have, whether it's working on the research or it's working on the residency programs, they're all dyad run. It's a leader from CentraCare and it's a leader from the university who work in tandem around it. So we see like the intangible value that we're getting from the university is something I don't know, you couldn't really even put a price on it. Like none of this would happen if we weren't able to get that knowledge base from the university.
And what about the faculty here? Obviously, the U has med school campuses in the Twin Cities and Duluth, but this is quite a commute. Where are the folks that are teaching these new students coming from?
When we first started talking about this 4 years ago, one of the concerns we had is that, we were not an academic, medical center. And since we weren't, a lot of our physicians came here to, practice clinically, but we didn't know would they want to teach or not teach. And we were concerned, like, would we get enough of our physicians who would be interested in being faculty? And we were overwhelmed at the interest that was coming from our own physicians. So almost all the faculty they're actually physicians from CentraCare. Now, we will be getting faculty support from the University of Minnesota, for example, like the anatomy instruction. That will be a University of Minnesota faculty member, but the vast majority of the faculty is actually coming from CentraCare.
So let's talk a little bit about the long term here. I know CentraCare is committed to caring for people in central and western Minnesota, but those are places that it can be hard to recruit physicians, nurses, and other staff. How is this going to make a difference in the long run?
Well, we have a vision at CentraCare, and we call it really quite simply, it's making rural life healthier. And we really take that serious. And that means for us, for outstate Minnesota to thrive, you have to have good healthcare and you have to have good jobs and you have to have good education. And we really see this as a way we can contribute to that by, providing better healthcare, by helping those communities thrive. And then if you just do the math, there's various studies out there that show what the downstream impact of a physician typically it leads to on average, 13 to 14 support roles in estimation that it generates another 1.5 million of economic benefits. So we kind of see it as it's a bit of our contribution back to making rural life healthier in Minnesota. We kind of envision over the long term, we will transition into being a rural focused academic health system. So we will continue to, graduate 24 students every year. We'll probably eventually expand the number of students, and we've got more space in that building. So we'll probably grow beyond 24, but then getting up to 72 residents in training. And as we've always said is, we hope all those residents that we graduate, we hope they stay in practice at CentraCare. But if they go practice elsewhere in outstate Minnesota, we're going to be just as happy. If they go and practice in Alamere and Alexandria, for example, we're fine with that. We just want them to stay somewhere in Minnesota because that's what we're trying to solve is a physician shortage in Minnesota. And if we can, get them to stay anywhere, it could be up in Essentia, we're fine with that. But just get them to stay in outstate Minnesota, we think that'll be a real win.
And talk to me a little bit about the other things CentraCare is doing to bolster workforce. Obviously, physician recruitment and retention is a big issue, but boy, we see across the board with hospitals and health systems across Minnesota, as many as 1 in 6 jobs are open. This is a big, high-profile project, but what's the other stuff you're doing day to day to keep those staff members at the bedside, in the clinics, making rural Minnesota healthy.
hmm Yeah, that's a really, I really appreciate that too, because that really is key. Is we have to have that engaged workforce, and that's a real focus with CentraCare. Is we want to make sure that all of our team members that they're engaged in that work, they feel valued in that work, because just as you point out, there's staffing shortages all across the country when it comes to healthcare, whether that's nurses or even individuals who work in environmental services or nutrition. In we strive to make sure that everybody understands that they're all part of a team. It's just like a sports team. You can have a great quarterback, but if the rest of your players aren't engaged and they're not fully focused on the mission, you're not going to get any wins. And we kind of think of it the same way. As we want all of our team members to be really tied into that mission. We really want them to be tied into providing that high quality care for all of our patients, and that's a combination of making sure everybody understands the mission, make sure that everybody is, fairly compensated, making sure that every day we're trying to make, everybody's jobs easier. And if their jobs are easier in the sense that you're not running into just those little snafus that can really kind of bother you during a day, we're going to have team members who are going to be much more engaged, and engaged team members provide great care, and they also provide a great experience for our patients and their families.
Well, it sounds like a great start to a new era there in central Minnesota. Look forward to seeing those students in the classroom and eventually out taking care of Minnesotans. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Again, that's Mike Blair, the CFO and Senior Vice President of Academic Affairs at CentraCare. I'm Tim Nelson, and you've been listening to Hospital Matters from the Minnesota Hospital Association. Join us next time for another look at issues impacting hospitals, health systems, and patient care in Minnesota. Thanks for listening.